y'all. Welcome back to another episode of True North Sports Talk Podcast. I am your host, as always, Peter Barclay here, and this episode, if you are a Blue Jays fan, this episode hurts. I mean, if you're a Dodgers fan or a Mets fan, you're probably pretty ecstatic right now, the same way Blue Jays fans were earlier in the offseason when we were able to land Dylan Cease, Okamoto, all those other moves that were made earlier in the offseason. But for Blue Jays fans, the last 48 hours were, in a way, you could say, devastating for the Toronto Blue Jays and their fans. We've been saying all offseason, and we've been looking forward to the fact that we figured we were getting one of two players or both of these players. However, if you go back and look at my podcast for sure, and there are other people out there who made whispers that, hey, you know what? There's a real possibility that we are not going to receive either one of these two players. So, on Thursday, January 15th, Kyle Tucker, who was, from the moment the World Series ended, and even before that a little bit, was linked to the Toronto Blue Jays as being their top target for the offseason. Those waters were muddied slightly by their hometown superstar in the fact that Bichette was on the market as well. Now, if you crunch some numbers and look at how much money the Blue Jays made during that World Series run last year, you could easily make the argument that this team should have had one or both of these players without question. Now, Kyle Tucker was probably the more courted player, the one they went after the most, sadly. But when you look at the deals that these two players signed, as a Blue Jays observer, it's hard to fathom how, unless it was personal things that these two players wanted, I'm 100% sure that we offered more than both of the contracts that were accepted by these players. We'll get into that. So the number one target, he signed a 4-year, $240 deal with the Dodgers. That's an astounding $57 million per year. And the scary number is that is well over $100 million per year based on the luxury tax that the Dodgers are going to pay for this player. Now, obviously, all that money does not go to Kyle Tucker. That gets spread out amongst other teams. But they are going to pay $60 million-ish in tax just to have Kyle Tucker on their team. So that's astounding. They've also deferred something like $33 million of that contract, which puts them in the heading for $1.1 billion in deferred payments. So that is a real scary number if you're a baseball fan, even in the slightest, seeing as how this is going to be the next balls and strikes issue. balls and strikes are now going to have challenges this year. I think we'll probably do a podcast about that topic. But the thing about it is, this whole deferred payment system, while it's a nice loophole that every team has the capability to use, they don't necessarily have the capability to use it in the terms that the Dodgers are using it. I mentioned on last week's podcast that I think in the next collective bargaining agreement, there needs to be a cap. Not a salary cap, just a cap on how much deferred money each team is allowed to have. What that number is, I don't know. Is it 100 million, 300, 5, 6, whatever that number is, there needs to be a cap. And it needs to be well under $1 billion. Just simply because if this was a salary cap, it would be considered salary cap circumvention, what the Dodgers are doing. It also would lend to fair play amongst the other teams. It balances things out even more the way we need it to, so that it's not always Yankees, Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, Red Sox. Like, these big market teams aren't the ones that we are always seeing in the World Series. So, 24 hours after Kyle Tucker signed, then we got the news about Bo Bichette on Friday. Bo Bichette signed a 3-year, $126 million contract, and we always knew his was going to be quite a bit less than Tucker's. But from what I have heard, we offered Bo Bichette quite a lot more than that to stay with the Blue Jays. Now, I've heard whisperings the last few days, and if you've been following closely enough, you may have as well, that one of the drawbacks to Skydome has, from the day it was created, always been the fact that it's an AstroTurf stadium. And after having played on it for the last 8 years, you can imagine Bo Bichette is thinking longevity. So what does that mean? Well, that means he'll take less years, less money to go play in a place like New York, where he's on a natural field. And thankfully, to probably all Blue Jays fans, he did not go to the crosstown rival Yankees. So it doesn't sting like that would have, even though it still stings. So that right there is 2 gut punches back to back. And we all knew once Kyle Tucker signed that dominoes were going to fall. The Blue Jays swung and missed on Tucker, and they chose, more or less, not to bring back Bichette. So let that sink in. Today, we're going to take a look at what happened, why it happened, what it means for the future of the Blue Jays. Where do they go from here? We'll talk about the Tucker pursuit, why the Dodgers won again, and we'll dive into the Bichette situation and whether the Jays made the right call. Now, I've had conversations with people over the last number of months since the World Series and with the signings that have been made so far this off-season. And the truth is, and I was even saying this again right after Bichette got signed, is that this roster is crowded. And that's a good problem to have. But it also makes going after a Bichette or a Tucker almost redundant and unnecessary, which is why we maybe saw the Jays ease off and not actually win out in these sweepstakes. So there's always that question. Could it have been? Should it have been? But we'll talk about whether the Jays made the right call. Now, there is a former talking head in the sports world up here in Canada, but since he's moved on to other endeavors, they still ask him about sports. He still has opinions on sports, and that is none other than Mr. Sid Seixeiro. And he raised a very interesting question, one that I know as an observer, to a degree, but not quite as involved, had crossed my mind as well. But we'll get into it a bit more throughout the podcast. What did Sid say? Well, he just floated it out there. Could the Blue Jays put together an enticing enough package, being as we've talked about the crowded roster, that would entice the Detroit Tigers to part ways with their disgruntled superstar in Tarik Skubal? Now, once the arbitration deadline passed and the numbers were in a way publicized, the whole sports world went, that's a big gap. The Detroit Tigers and Tarik Skubal are $13 million apart. An arbitrator is going to have to decide whether he gets the higher number, which is probably his, or the lower number, which is the team's. And the team has to prove to that arbitrator that he doesn't deserve his number. Coming off back-to-back Cy Youngs, being one of the strikeout leaders, being a left-handed pitcher, being who Tarik Skubal is, as an arbitrator, you're going to have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt why you shouldn't pay him what he's asking for. And that is why we're going to take a look at, is there any sort of truth as to the Blue Jays maybe sneaking in there and scoop him out of Detroit? Is it a possibility? I've opined to people in my circles that the Blue Jays are pretty well set up, that if they did put together a package, one, their pitching staff immediately gets upgraded. Doesn't matter who out of that staff they trade for him. And number two, there's a position player or two that could be enticing to the Detroit Tigers and would benefit from more playing time. So who knows? Maybe. We'll see. Obviously, when Sid Seixeiro talks about it, he may still have contacts within the league. And there may be a little bit of smoke rising out of there, which means underneath there might be some fire going on. Time will tell. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about who the options to trade might be. And then near the end, there's a couple of forgotten pieces that could end up being upgrades, not by accident, but just by sheer fact that these two guys have been there all along. They were just injured for most of last year. And the question will be, can they pick up where they left off in 2024 going into 2025? And those two guys are Yimi Garcia and Bowden Francis. Where do they fit into this bullpen / in Bowden's case, starting rotation? Bowden Francis last year was the number 3 starter on opening day. That didn't last long, and eventually he was replaced by Eric Lauer, who turned out to be a godsend for this team. And again, it's hard to fathom how the Blue Jays are going to prove that he's not worth his number based on what he did for this team last year. Why he fell out of favor later in the season, nobody will ever know. Because what he did in the hardest part of the season, being June, July, and August, as a starter for this team, can never be understated by anyone who observes this team. He was pitching under a 3 ERA. He was going deep into ball games at a time when they absolutely had to have a guy who did that. And he took so much pressure off of that starting rotation and off of that bullpen that it really irked this observer at the time when he was removed from the starting lineup, or rotation, I guess would be a better way to say it. But then he just kind of faded into obscurity. And no one asked John Schneider why. Or if they did and he played it off, they should have demanded more answers, quite frankly. So we're going to talk about all of these things down near the ending of the episode, so you're going to want to stick around and see how we go here. So let's start with Kyle Tucker, because in some circles, this is the one that stings perhaps the most. On Thursday night, Kyle Tucker, as we mentioned, agreed to 4 years, $240 million with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The deal includes opt-outs after years 2 and 3. So he's got to be there at least 1 year, in fact 2 years, before he can opt out. He was given a $64 million signing bonus. Pretty sure we could have beat that. And $30 million in deferrals, bringing the present day value to approximately $57 million per year. That is the highest average annual value in Major League history. Now, he doesn't have the term that Juan Soto or his teammate now in Ohtani when they broke the record, but he still gets paid more than that, which is why I said 110% of $57 million. That's about $110 to $120 million per year the Dodgers are going to have to pay for this guy. Tucker chose the Dodgers over the Blue Jays and the New York Mets, and for Toronto, this is the latest in a string of rejections from superstar players. Now, granted, there was Dylan Cease in the middle there, but starting 2022, the Jays lost out on Ohtani to the Dodgers. In 2024, they lost out on Juan Soto to the Mets. Thank God for that one, because that dude's a cancer in the locker room. Sadly, Bichette's going to be playing with him, but there are serious work ethic questions and attitude questions surrounding Juan Soto. Weeks ago, or not weeks ago, but last year, they lost Roki Sasaki to the Dodgers, and now Kyle Tucker also to the Dodgers. That's 4 times in 3 years that the Blue Jays have been finalists for generational talent, and 4 times they came up short. Now, could you argue that Dylan Cease is a generational talent? Perhaps. You could definitely argue that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is generational talent, and guess what? They signed him too. So to be fair, the Blue Jays made Kyle Tucker a very, very serious offer. According to reports, they were looking at 6 to 7 years. They were looking at around $350 million. It's just not the immediate payout that he got from the Dodgers. The Mets reportedly offered Tucker around $50 per, over 4 years. So you're looking at least $200 million. But the Dodgers gave him the record-setting annual average value, and they gave him the opt-outs and the chance to play with the back-to-back World Series champions. Kyle Tucker's 28, turning 29, and he's one of the best all-around players in baseball at the moment. That 266 average leaves a lot to be desired in that regard. He had 22 home runs, 73 RBIs, 25 stolen bases for a ho-hum Chicago Cubs team. He's a career 140 OPS hitter with elite plate discipline. The 266 average makes me question that. Power, 22's not bad, but it's nowhere near Vladimir Guerrero Jr. numbers. But here's the kicker, he does have defensive versatility. For the Blue Jays, Tucker would have been a good addition, as he could have basically become a younger version of George Springer from the beginning of Springer's contract. He would have fit in very well beside Dalton Varsho. And who knows who else will be in that outfield, because you got Santander, you got Lucas, you got Barger who can play the outfield, you got David Schneider who can play the outfield, Okamoto can apparently play the outfield, you got Loperfido waiting in the wings. So there is so much talent that you could have put around Tucker. And again, we haven't even talked about Miles Straw yet, who is essential to have that 1-2 Gold Glove punch in the outfield with Varsho and Straw. And there's just so many different things that you could have done with this lineup. He would have provided protection to a degree for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., especially with Bo Bichette coming off the books the next day. And he would have given them superstar power to put with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for at minimum the next 4 years, if not more. But instead, Tucker's going to the Dodgers. He's going to join Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Teoscar Hernandez, Will Smith, and it just keeps going on and on with that team. Now, granted though, that Dodgers team needed a center fielder really badly at the end of last year going into that World Series run. So Kyle Tucker helps in that regard, as they can move guys around to figure that position out. So for them, they have now become the overwhelming favorites to three-peat, which hasn't been done since the late 90s New York Yankees. And so we will see, is this a dynasty? The Blue Jays, well, in terms of this, they are left empty-handed once again. Thing about it is, can you really blame Kyle Tucker for wanting to go to the glitz and the glam of the LA Dodgers? No, not really. They're one of the best run organizations in all of baseball right now. I don't know if I would say top to bottom, because their farm system hasn't really produced a lot over the last 5 to 10 years, but they can sure go out and buy whatever they want to the tune of $1 billion in deferrals. So they just beat the Blue Jays in 11 innings in Game 7 of the World Series. They got a $400 million payroll for just one season and can offer everything that a player of Tucker's caliber could want. They even have the tragic pitching machine that the Blue Jays have, so he didn't miss out on anything in terms of facility either. So they gave him the money, The weather, the endorsements, the championships, everything a player looks for in a team. Still a little bit frustrating for the Jays fans simply because, once again, we were right there. How much of a role did the turf play in Kyle Tucker's decision makes you wonder. And also, too, is that, I mean, we look at it as Jays fans going, we have the money. There's no question about the money. Why wasn't it enough? They made a real competitive offer. They have the money as the Blue Jays. And they also, they were in the World Series last year. We have all the facilities that are brand new after renovating Skydome. And still, for some reason, that wasn't enough for either of these guys. What does that mean for the Jays? Well, according to the reports, the Jays are going to have to, and I mean, we don't even need reports to know that, but they have to pivot. They'd been pursuing Tucker aggressively. They signed Kazuma Okamoto to 4 years, $68. Third base, DH, first base, outfield. He could go anywhere they need him to. But they could also afford to go big on Kyle Tucker. But with Kyle Tucker off the board, the Jays' focus shifted. And that brings us to Mr. Bichette. And this part is, to most Jays fans, I would say, even more painful than the Kyle Tucker thing. On Friday, less than 24 hours after Tucker signed, Bo Bichette agreed to a 3-year, $126 million contract with the New York Mets. That's $42 million per year, making him one of the highest paid infielders in all of baseball. The problem is, for Bo Bichette, they have a guy named Francisco Lindor at shortstop who's pretty dang good himself. So Bichette's either going to have to play third, which sounds like what New York is thinking, or maybe even second base. Time will tell where he spends most of his time this year. Bichette's only 27 years old. He was a homegrown Blue Jay star, coming up all the way through the minors to the majors with Vladdy. And he was drafted in the second round in 2016. He came up through the minors, and they debuted together in 2019. They became the faces of the franchise together. And now a massive part of our organization is gone. How do you replace, as an organization, a plus 300, like a 310, 320 batting average, a guy who, when healthy, gets the most hits in not just the American League, not just our division, all of Major League Baseball? How do you choose not to bring this guy back? According to Steve Simmons of the Toronto Sun, the Jays didn't really lose out on Bo Bichette. They never really got into the game. That was their choice. That's what Simmons reported. Question is, why? That makes zero sense from a marketing standpoint, from a player needs standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, what that says about keeping your homegrown players around long term. It just doesn't make any sense. Why do you not pursue this guy? Now, unless he walked into Mark Shapiro's office or Ross Atkins' office and said, "Don't try, I'm not signing," short of that, you put $400 million in front of this guy if you need to, and keep him here. How do you replace that kind of on base, that kind of hitting, how do you replace it? If you play the game the right way, he hits the home run that wins the World Series for you. How do you replace that? So if you don't even try, there's a problem there. And if you remember, I've been saying all along for the past year and a half that we need new management. And if they didn't even offer Bichette a contract, we need new management. I mean, yeah, they've built something here in this team to the point where the roster's crowded, but I want 311, 20 home runs, a bunch of RBIs, and a guy that shows up in October playing shortstop over a guy who barely hits his body weight. It just don't make no sense. I mean, yeah, sure, he's got gold gloves, but he again, barely hits his body weight. That's 200 at best. And that's who you're going to replace Bichette with? Come on, guys. Like, you at least have to show him you care. This is also a guy who said he wants to come back. And you didn't try? Steve Simmons also wrote, the front office of Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, they didn't care a whole lot for Bichette. Going back to firing the scout who recommended drafting him years ago, picking up a terrible contract in Andreas Jimenez, knowing that he could play shortstop once Bichette had left Toronto. Guys, personal feelings need to be put aside and figure out what's actually best for this team. So, let's talk about why the Blue Jays might have made this decision. There are some legitimate reasons. Now, one of the reasons is Bichette over recent years has noticeably not been as good on defense. Now, is that because he was getting tired of playing on the turf all the time and just didn't want to put his body on the line that way? Was he putting more effort into his 300 plus batting average and getting his hits? Was it the fact that he was dealing with injuries far more than people knew? And that's why he had a defensive decline? But that is one argument. He posted minus 19 defensive runs saved, minus 32 outs above average at shortstop over his career. His range wasn't quite what it used to be, and many scouts believed he's better for second or third base. And if you're the Blue Jays, simply swap him and Jimenez, or put Ernie at second and Bichette at, or even Ernie at short and Bichette at third. Like, you had the pieces, you could have moved them around. The Blue Jays already had Andreas Jimenez at shortstop. Jimenez is a 3-time Gold Glove winner. He's elite defensively, but again, that batting average, that's where I kind of go, I don't know, that's like having Dalton Varsho in center field. You love Varsh. He's a great kid. Plays amazing. Like that catch he made where he fell, rolled, and still caught the ball. Like, that's what you pay him for, but you get him at the plate and you're like, ooh, sometimes. So, also, one of the things that hurt the Jays when they went after Tucker and Bichette is that they prioritized pitching this offseason. They really did. Dylan Cease, 210, Cody Ponce, 30, Tyler Rogers, 37. They paid out a lot of money, and they're still looking for another starter. We'll get to that a bit later. We already potentially mentioned one person they could be looking at. And the money they saved by not signing Bichette, well, they could use that. And I think part of it is they need insurance for Jose Barrios, as he's been declining. And I've said this all along, and I wonder if maybe they're thinking it too, is that you need perhaps to start Trey Savage at AAA this year. Now, people are slotting him in at number 5 just automatically because they don't seem to have anything else at this point. Problem is, he came up so quickly through the minors last year that he could maybe use some more time down there, not as a demotion or to say we don't think you're good enough, but maybe they want to protect him a little bit from getting too overseen too quickly, and after pitching more innings than he's ever pitched, maybe just take some stress off of that arm to help it last longer. Now, going back to Bichette, his injury history is starting to become a thought too as to why they maybe didn't. In 2024, he had calf, broken finger, all that kind of stuff. He missed the final weeks of last year's season on an ill-advised slide that caused a knee injury. And $42 million a year for someone with durability questions, that might have been where they decided not to go after him. That passion they might be looking for, Bo Bichette was just a cerebral guy. He's very quiet. He doesn't talk a lot. And they maybe thought that constituted a lack of caring. If you thought that, Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, you would be wrong. Even though you know him better than the rest of us, I don't think you know him. So the flip side of that was Bo Bichette was, and this is an understatement, beloved in Toronto. He was one of the great homegrown talents that we've had in years. And in franchise history, it could be argued. He led the AL in hits in 21, 22. He came in second last year because of that injury. He was a 2-time All-Star. Last season, he hit .311, 18 home runs, 94 RBIs. He finished second in the batting race, like we said. In the World Series, he was clutch. Even with that knee injury, hitting .348, he had a home run, 6 RBIs in 7 games. Letting him walk, especially after losing Tucker, feels like a big mistake to probably the entire fan base, not just many fans. The optics here are terrible, especially after Bichette's Game 7. I've said I want to be here from the beginning. That's Bo Bichette's words. I'll remember this group forever. I think this group taught me what a team is. He wanted to stay. You couldn't figure something out? Really? You want me to believe that? You want your fan base to believe that? I think y'all need to give your head a shake if that's what you think we would believe as a fan base. I would say even inside that locker room, you really think they believe you? Come on. They're a lot smarter than that, as are your fans. We know better. You just didn't like the guy. As Steve Simmons pointed out. And that's not a reason not to bring him back. Now he's going to the Mets. He's going to play third base most likely, beside Francisco Lindor, beside Juan Soto. The Mets needed a boost after losing Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz, Brandon Nimmo. Although Nimmo was a trade, so they kind of made that decision. And Bichette gives them that. The Blue Jays, well, they're left with Jimenez at short, Ernie Clement at second. I'm quite alright with that. Especially the way Clement played last year. You can slot Davis Schneider in at second on occasion if you need to. He's played third on occasion. You got Okamoto, who can play third. You got Barger, who can play third. You got IKF, who can play all of those positions if you need to. And, I mean, it's okay. It's just, how do you replace the league leader in hitting? It's just not the same. The fan base, rightfully so, is furious. Social media has been brutal, rightfully so, towards Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. Some fans are calling for their heads to roll. This observer has been calling for that for well over a season now. The only reason I would ever enter Skydome until they're fired is if the tickets are free. I will never put money into their tickets. Ever. And to find out they didn't even try on Bichette, the fans know, and they are questioning whether management knows or has a clue what they're doing. It was like a trade a few years ago with Teoscar Hernandez and then Lourdes Gurriel that they just destroyed the beautiful chemistry that those locker rooms had. They seem to find a way to build it, think it's too good, and then tear it apart. It's like, what's wrong with you? You struck lightning in a bottle at least twice on that front. Why are you trying to let it out of the bag? Like, come on. I get where the fans are coming from. Losing Tucker and Bichette in the space of 48 hours, that's a PR nightmare for any team. Much less the Jays, who have the money to sign both of them. Much less one, and they lost both of them. That sours the fan base mouth, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, the Jays may have had what they felt were good reasons for letting Bichette walk. But this just feels like the whole Mitch Marner thing all over again. Some Toronto executive that gets on their high horse and says, we don't need you. Well, look at the Leafs this season and the difference one player has made. I don't know, guys. It's just yikes. But it leads to our next question, and that is, what do the Jays do next? So, the Jays struck out on Tucker. They chose not to bring back Bichette. Now what? Well, the good news is we're still just under a month from pitchers and catchers. And we're a couple of months out from the start of the season. So this offseason hasn't been a complete failure. What they have done is sign Dylan Cease, Kazuma Okamoto, Tyler Rogers, Cody Ponce, Chase Lee. They've spent over $337 million. That's the most out of any team. Their projected rotation includes Dylan Cease, Kevin Gausman, Shane Bieber, Jose Barrios, potentially Trey Savage. I'd put that starting rotation up against anyone in the game. Their bullpen features Jeff Hoffman. You got Tyler Rogers. You got Yimi Garcia if he's healthy. You haven't even mentioned Louis Varlin, Mason Fluharty, Braden Fisher. Who else we got there? Eric Lauer's going to be there. You got potentially Bowden Francis there. I feel like I'm missing some guys. But there you go. There's so many of them. that I don't remember a time really where there were this many relievers, 92, 93 maybe, that were of this caliber that you're looking to put out there. So they do have pieces in place. Their lineup includes Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Kazuma Okamoto, Dalton Varsho, George Springer, Ernie Clement. We haven't even talked, or we rarely talk about Barger in any meaningful way, but he's there. You got Miles Straw, you got Nathan Lucas, you got Davis Schneider. It's not the lineup that maybe wanted, not having Tucker and Bichette, but that's going to be a nightmare for opposing teams. We haven't even mentioned Anthony Santander. He's in there as well. The Jays' luxury tax is around $309 million. They're paying 100%, 110% tax on any players that they bring in. But they look willing to go the Dodgers route and pay to play. According to reports, the Blue Jays are still in the market. They're looking for a starting pitcher. Hopefully they don't bring in Framber Valdez, but he's out there. Ranger Suarez recently signed, so he's off the map. Zach Gallen's name is out there. If the Jays look for one more ace caliber starter, their rotation becomes scary elite. It really does. They could use a right-handed bat with Bichette gone. The Blue Jays could go after Cody Bellinger. He's still available as the Yankees haven't been able to bring him in. And it's been talked about with the Blue Jays. Bullpen depth, they could look for more of that. I don't know that they need to. They got so many arms out there, but if you got someone who's throwing 99 gas and is reliable, durable, that kind of thing, kind of hard to say no to, especially if the price is right. So the offseason isn't over. Spring training, again, a little under a month away, and the Jays have time for more moves. And we all know that even during spring training, those moves can still roll in. The reality, though, losing Tucker and Bichette hurts, but even with all those moves they've made, the Jays, I wouldn't say they're worse than the team that lost Game 7, but you can't necessarily assume they're going to be the same team they were last year. Guys have off years, maybe they have up and down years, you never know what the injuries are going to look like, but the Jays have room to work. Will they compete in 2026? Some would argue they're the team to beat. The AL East is a juggernaut as always. I mean, the Yankees have work to do, although they went out and got a closer, so that helps them become better instantly. The Orioles are still trying to build back. The Red Sox have been kind of So the Jays have a good shot as anyone. Don't count out Tampa Bay, as you know they're always doing interesting things behind the scenes, and they have guys coming up through their system at all times, it seems. So to win a championship, they're going to need everything to go the way they're hoping. They need that bounce back they're counting on from Dylan Cease. Okamoto, they need to help his adjusting to Major League pitching. You need Trey Savage to be Trey Savage and have a Rookie of the Year caliber season. You need Yimi Garcia to stay healthy. You need Gausman and Bieber to stay healthy and at ace level. Truthfully, that's a lot of what ifs. So this could go either way. It could go really bad. It could go really good. Who knows? But again, that's why you play 162 games, right? All right. So we hinted at this earlier on. Hopefully you stuck around to this point. Tarik Skubal. Is there any truth to that? Is he the elephant in the room? Well, over the last week, there have been rampant rumors linking the Blue Jays to Tarik Skubal. And folks, these rumors get fascinating. Who is Tarik Skubal? Well, he's a 29-year-old left-handed pitcher, and the Jays don't really have any starting lefties with Eric Lauer out of the rotation. He just won his second consecutive Cy Young Award in the American League, and in 2025 he went 13-6 with a 2.21 ERA, 241 strikeouts, and a .89 with hitters in position. He pitched 195.1 innings and is the best pitcher, certainly in the American League, but potentially all of baseball, period. Skubal is entering his final year of team control before becoming a free agent. He's projected to be the richest pitcher ever, potentially $400 million or more. So why would the Tigers trade him? Well, because of a massive arbitration battle. On January 8th, Skubal and the Tigers failed to reach a contract settlement. Skubal filed for $32 million, which back-to-back Cy Youngs, leading the league in strikeouts, best pitcher in baseball. I mean, those $32 million's best pitcher in baseball numbers. The Tigers, on the other hand, said, we'll give you 19. That's not even a qualifying offer, folks. Which you would think, as a major league team with a guy of that caliber, you go, we better give him at least a qualifying offer. But that's a $13 million gap. That's the largest in arbitration history. If Skubal wins his case, he'll set a new record, beating out Juan Soto's $31 million from 2024. And he'll also demolish the record set for a pitcher by David Price, who got just under $20 million in 2015. The Tigers are notoriously cheap. They are a mid-market team at best. They've let multiple generational aces walk over the years. At one point, they had both Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer on the same roster. And now, could they let another one walk away in Tarik Skubal? The organization has a history of refusing to pay premium prices for elite pitchers. Makes you wonder why they got David Price at all before he came to the Blue Jays back then. And here's where it gets interesting. The Blue Jays have been linked to Skubal in trade rumors for months. That's not just, like I mentioned off the top, that's not just from when the arbitration numbers came out. There's been talk of this for a long time. And they are supposedly one of the most interested teams in getting Skubal. Jeff Passan even mentioned Toronto as a potential landing spot at one point in time as well. Why would the Jays go after him? Well, simply he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. Adding him to the likes of Cease, Gausman, and Bieber, that would give them the best starting five in all of baseball. Even if your Savage is your fifth guy, that's still pretty dang good. Skubal's left-handed. Just mentioned that a minute ago. The Blue Jays don't have that right now. And they haven't had that since Lauer, and before that, maybe going all the way. Oh, no. What's his name? It was after Ryu. Kikuchi. Since Yusei Kikuchi. That's the last time they had a legit left-handed starting pitcher. Forgive me there. I knew it would take me a minute. I just had to pull that name out of the Rolodex. So they could really use him. But what could the Blue Jays give up? According to the reports, The Tigers' asking price is astronomical. One report said it would take half the team to pry Skubal away. The Yankees apparently checked in and immediately said, nope, that price is way too high. So what could a realistic trade package look like? Well, the first name on this list is one that I myself immediately came up with. But it's a name I've seen out there. Meaning I'm not the only one who thought of it. Jose Barrios had a very difficult year for the Blue Jays last year. For the first time in his career, he went to the injured list. For a guy who has been so good for so long, who's made 32 starts his entire career, things just didn't go his way last year. The Tigers would need a starting pitcher of Barrios' caliber to take Skubal's place in the rotation. Barrios is a veteran right-hander. He's got playoff experience, and he's owed a fair amount through the 2028 season. That does complicate things potentially. You could throw in a Ricky Tiedemann. You could throw in a Bowden Francis. You could throw in a few other guys maybe that would be enticing. But a 99-mile-an-hour, 22-year-old lefty in Tiedemann is something the Tigers would love. They may not love his injury history, but they would really like a Ricky Tiedemann. Some prospects that you could send, maybe an Orelvis Martinez, an Alan Roden, and maybe some other prospects or major league ready players, maybe a Loperfido, maybe a Davis Schneider gets put in that package, who knows. But that would be a massive haul for the Detroit Tigers. Even then, they might say no. Then there's the financial side. Skubal likely will get the $32 million, or close to it. That's a one-year commitment. But if the Jays trade for him, they'd almost certainly try to extend him almost immediately, and that would cost them $400 million or more. So can the Blue Jays afford that? They're already at $309 million in luxury tax payroll. Adding Skubal's 32 would push them to $340, and an extension would lock in massive money for pretty close to the next decade. Is there any truth to the rumors? Well, I would say yes, there are. The Blue Jays definitely have interest in Tarik Skubal. They've kicked the tires on him before. Seeing this discrepancy in the numbers, and knowing that Skubal will be probably pretty disgruntled if he doesn't get his $32 million. They've had internal discussions. They'd be crazy not to. I'm not sure that anything's really imminent, but fantasy baseball, it's nice to throw the ideas around. You've had some credible sources that have talked about it. MLB insiders think the most likely scenario is that this is a trade deadline thing where they reassess. If Detroit falls back to where they were in 2024 as opposed to last year, they would probably be more willing to let him go. But if they're up there like they were last year, leading the Central, they'd probably want to hold on to him for a playoff run. But if they're out of it, as we just said, look for the Blue Jays to be in that mix. But for now, I think it's probably more smoke than fire. But there's still that little bit of fire down near the bottom somewhere that could explode. Fun to dream though. You look at a rotation of Skubal, Cease, Gosman, Bieber, Savage, maybe Lauer or Bowden Francis if they have good years. That's championship level rotation right there. You got 4 guys you could legit put out there in any single series. You only need 3, but you got 4. 5 if you want to throw Savage into that mix after last year. I mean, you'd be sitting pretty if you're the Blue Jays and could get Tarik Skubal. Alright, so we're running up a little over our hour here. Hopefully you've stuck around for this. We're going to try and go a little bit quicker here through these next 2 guys, as we're just going to throw these names out there simply because no one's really talked about them this offseason. But they could be huge additions to this pitching staff depending on how it goes. So first we're going to talk Yimi Garcia. He's another year older, but he can still pitch with the best of them when he's healthy. So Yimi Garcia, 35 years old, right-handed reliever. He signed a 2-year, $15 million contract with the Blue Jays a year ago from now. And this was actually a reunion. Garcia pitched for the Jays from 2022 to mid-2024 before being traded to the Mariners at the deadline. In his first stint with Toronto, Garcia was dominant. In the first half of 2024, he posted a .270 ERA in 29 appearances with an 80 whip, 42 strikeouts in 30 innings, and was a key setup man for then closer Jordan Romano. Since then, though, the injuries have hit. Garcia went on the injured list in July of that year with right elbow ulnar neuritis, and he was eventually traded to Seattle. In Seattle, he struggled. When he re-signed with the Jays in 2024, the expectation was that he'd be the setup man for Jeff Hoffman going into last year. It started out that way, but then he got injured and spent the entire season almost on the injured list with a couple of minor things here and there. In May, it was right shoulder impingement. 1 appearance later in July, he had elbow issues and had surgery to clean up some scar tissues. In 21 innings, that's not nearly enough for what you were hoping for. He had a .386 ERA, 1.19 whip. So those numbers went up a little bit, but not scary. With a bounce back year this year, he could bring those numbers back down, and he could be a gigantic asset that they never had last year. And why last year they went out and got Dominguez from the Orioles. They needed a Garcia without having a Garcia. The Blue Jays bullpen, based on stubborn use of Brandon Little, and certain other players last year by John Schneider, kind of made it their Achilles heel. They blew Game 7 of the World Series. Jeff Hoffman gave up a home run to Miguel Rojas in the 9th. And then their bullpen that was ranked 20th in Major League Baseball. When healthy, Garcia could give the Jays a strikeout pitcher. He handles high leverage situations really well. He can close after Hoffman's pitched a day or two. He's got 29 career saves on that front. And so you're not running the same guy out there day after day if you need to. He's got a team-friendly contract at $7.5 million for the year. When he's healthy, his stuff is nasty. His fastball is in the 96, 97 range. And he has 6 different pitches to keep players off balance. The Question is always, can he stay healthy at 35 years old with recent elbow surgery? There is some risk there, but if healthy, he could be very, very effective. Bowden Francis, on the other hand, could be on the outside looking in. His situation is far more complicated. He's 28 years old. He's a right-hander as well. He had a breakout second half of 2024. In much of August and September that year, he was flirting with no-hitters. He was basically unhittable, posting a 105 ERA in August and a 216 in September. He finished with an 8-5 record and a 3.30 ERA with a 9.26 WHIP. He looked like a future rotation mainstay. And the Jays fans, the Jays organization, they were pretty happy about that. And then last year, Francis started the season strong, going 2-3 with 3.58 ERA over his first 5 starts. And then all of a sudden, he looked human. He struggled with the long ball. He struggled with control, allowing 19 home runs in 64 innings. And his ERA went to 6.05, which is very odd for him even before that breakout season. In June, he went on the injured list with a shoulder impingement, and he never returned. His underlying metrics were ugly, to say the least. Exit velocity, barrel rate, hard hit percentage, walk rate, all these things. His strikeout rate dropped. So where does he fit this year? Well, the problem is the Blue Jays rotation is stacked. He's insurance for sure, but you got Cease, Gausman, Bieber, Barrios, you got Yasevich, you got Lauer who could fit in there, you got Tiedemann potentially. So he's really got to outperform. Then you brought in Cody Ponce, who's in the mix. So, I mean, Francis has options. So most likely he'll start in Buffalo. The Jays could use him as organizational depth. They could use him as a trade bait for Skubal or anyone else that they're looking at. So could Francis work his way back? Sure. Injuries do happen. He's got to do well when he's pitching. If Bieber or Barrios go down, Francis could get a look. But the truth is, he is going to have to fight and earn it and show the late 2024 potential that we saw there. He reminds me of some guys back a few years ago where I'd have to go look up names. Dustin McGowan is one that comes to mind. But players of that ilk where all the potential in the world is there, it just needs to be realized. The other possibility is the bullpen, which is before he took off in 2024, he was the setup guy, late inning guy. He was being relied on heavily out of the bullpen. So his power fastball, his changeup, those things could really give him a spot in that bullpen. If you make him the mop-up guy for blowout wins, that doesn't really help his development at all. So, bottom line, he had a rough 2025, and now he's on the outside looking in. He's got to prove where he belongs. If not, the Jays may look at using him at the trade deadline to see what they need and what they can get for him. So, alright, we've been at this for about an hour and 10 minutes now. The last 48 hours, meaning Thursday, Friday, have been real brutal for Blue Jays fans. Losing Kyle Tucker hurts. losing Bichette hurts more, especially now that we know that the Jays didn't even try to bring him back, and that hurts even more. Keep in mind, y'all, off-season's not over. Pitchers and catchers report next month. They've added Dylan Cease, Kazuma Okamoto, Tyler Rogers, Chase Lee, Cody Ponce, and they have one of the best rotations in baseball. Keep in mind, they're still hunting for more. Tarik Skubal's an interesting idea, but again, it's just an idea. You got addition just through health in Yimi Garcia. Bowden Francis can prove something. Question always is, what do you guys think? Use the hashtag True North Sports Talk. Let us know, can the Blue Jays win in 2026? I would say yes, they can. Could we have a World Series rematch? You better believe we would love to see that, with a different outcome this time, just because the big bad Dodgers need to fall off of that horse they're on. They are definitely a playoff team. They may not be the favorites, because they never are at the beginning of any season, really. The Dodgers are obviously the favorites. The Yankees are going to be a different team. The Orioles might surprise. The Tampa Bay Rays might surprise, going back to the Trop. 162 games, y'all. It's going to be fun. So what do you guys think? Let me know. Was it the right call for them not to even talk to Bichette hardly? Should they go all in and try and get Skubal? What do you guys think is next? Do you guys have any trades you'd like to see them make? Hit me up. Let me know. We want to hear from you. Appreciate you guys. If you stuck around to this point, we're going on an hour and 15 minutes. Thanks for tuning in to True North Sports Talk Podcast. Until next time, stay passionate, stay informed, and up here north of the border, let's go Jays.